Okay, hello. Tyler Bryden here. I hope everything is going well. It was a big night in history in the US, but I think really across the world with Trump right here in New York Times. Trump storms back. There's some things to consider for the actual House, but overall, this was a very decisive Donald Trump victory. Lots of talk about the movement that happened, the political movement, the DEI pushback, the wokeism pushback. And I think there's a lot of people waking up, the supportive side of that, questioning what happened and where did we go wrong. And in my video, I got a couple minutes before my daily team kickoff meeting for work here at Speak AI, but I stayed up all night watching this. My wife and I watching this. We're politically engaged in this, and hard to go to bed. And as soon as I jumped out of bed, it was hard to not jump back into the information and everything that was coming out. So I got a couple points that I think are worthwhile discussing. Sometimes I just go off the top. I actually put this in a little bit of a structured list, so I feel good about that. So I want to touch in on a couple, I think, key pieces there. First one, I think this is a highly discussed point already, so I don't really want to do it to death, but really this idea of the alternative media versus the legacy media networks. And so I dropped a couple of those. We know about the Rogan impact on the election, and I think just overall the podcast domination of this political election cycle, the impact those long-form conversations had, and then already concerns and criticisms around Kamala's inability to appear on those out of very highly structured interviews where there was editing and everything there, instead of just going in, talking, showing who you are, talking about what you care about, and really just showing that you're a real person. And I think one of these metrics that business are talked about, people are talked about in this world that we're in, is authenticity. And really there was a failure at a core level from that to happen in the Democratic Party in this election cycle, starting from Biden with his cognitive abilities to the non-open primary run and bringing Kamala in where she had struggled to even be a good candidate when she first originally run. And I think there was another one that, as I'm saying this, just comes to mind, which is also this idea of picking the best person. And I have a note on here on Vance, who I didn't know much about him when he first came out and got labeled this weird person. And the more you heard him talk, the more you realize that wasn't true. He's intelligent. He's articulate. Yes, there's this backing with Peter Thiel and David Sachs and all these people. Some people view that as a negative. Some people, I'm a fan of the All In podcast. I like this group of people. I think they've done some really incredible things. I would say that's a positive thing. And whether you like, again, this party or not, the articulation and intelligence of him is pretty clear, especially if you listen to long form conversation. So jumping back around a bit, I just wanted to give a shout out there. JD has an Indian wife, Usha, and I have an Indian wife as well too. So I felt a pretty deep connection to him in this run. And obviously there's the white male side, there's the Indian wife side, and someone who tries to be engaged politically and has value on intelligence. I think there was a really strong representation that he had in this run that made him a strong candidate. And I think where I was trying to go was a lot of questions around, first of all, why did Biden bring in Kamala was one question, the quality of people that you want to spend your time with, and can you bring the best people in? And the second people, why did Kamala bring in Tim Walz? And the obvious choice for a lot of people was this Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. So I thought that was really an interesting piece. And then jumping back to the alternative media, PBD, like him or not, 5 million streams on YouTube. We had the All In podcast. They did a live stream, a bunch of guests, really interesting time. They had David Sachs running around Mar-a-Lago, bringing people in. They had the guy, Shane, who did Polymarket, talking about how that played out. And it was crazy to watch that through the night, the divergence that it started to have as the numbers came in. Going in, and I have a note here on this idea of like subjective prediction based on all the qualitative assessment that myself was doing. My wife would talk about this stuff all the time, and we're Canadian citizens here, but view this as highly impactful on our lives. And our subjective assessment going into this was that Trump was going to win. Whether we wanted him to win or not, I think there was an important, they're using the term mandate set about pushback to certain things that are happening in the world that put a lot of people who wouldn't view themselves as voting for Donald Trump, put them on that side of wanting to see, if even not liking him, at the very least making a statement that there was some unacceptable movements happening in the world. And some people can dismiss that again as bigoted or racist or sexist or all these things. But there seems to be this visceral, primal pushback in reaction to it that, after seeing last night, can't seemingly be dismissed as a fringe thing anymore. And that was the assessment I have. Again, part of it was just the alternative media sources that we pay attention to. It seemed clear that the enthusiasm was for Trump. And I would say not just Trump, but the Republican Avengers, Vivek, Tulsi, RFK, all of these people. I'm not sure if this image is going to net me anything here. There we go. This was, first of all, at one point I was a huge Bernie supporter. I was a little bit more naive back then, but I appreciated him a lot. And I thought that he got canceled out of the Democratic Party. And that really threw attention, not just from, again, me as a Canadian here following this, but for a lot of people saying, oh my God, there is more rigging to this system than we thought, because there was obvious enthusiasm behind this candidate. And for whatever reason, he was blocked out from the establishment. We saw the same thing with RFK. And then we started to, people that we follow and admire, and whether you like him or not, Elon Musk, with the impact that he had, in many ways could have been in the Democratic camp of things, but was pushed and ostracized out of that party, like many people were, just like RFK. And so if anyone who was putting that vote for Trump, again, maybe they're seeing through him and they're actually voting for this team. And again, there's an even bigger group of people behind the veil that we had been tapped into through the all-in, now maybe not JCal specifically, but Chamath, David Sachs, people who we've watched for years, who are very intelligent people, passionate about the US and want to see it thriving. I think that needs to be understood. If you're classifying every person who votes for Donald Trump as a racist, bigoted person, obviously there's a bigger picture that you're missing out on there. And you hope that there is some grasp that people aren't just voting for him independently. There is more behind that. And that was a big piece. And I would say the prediction market versus the polling. And there's this famous Seltzer poll now already that obviously got things wrong, where what seems to happen is women voted for Trump. Obviously not all of them, but then African Americans and Hispanics also voted for Trump. So that was a huge turnout. There was the Puerto Rican Tony Hinchcliffe joke that was supposed to just devastate the party. And then Biden had his gaffe there. We saw Jill Biden red suit. We're not exactly sure what was going on with Jill Biden here and the Biden after they got pushed out and probably feels snubbed. And I can't imagine what old Biden is thinking here today after seeing, I think, Kamala lose 20 million votes compared to him. But the polling market got it wrong in a lot of ways, where this polling market seemed to have it right. And there was and it looked like it was going to be a lot closer. But as the numbers started coming in, it was very obvious that the prediction market started to see Trump as the victor here. And then before even that, there started to be some movements in the markets with the US dollar and other signals, yields, that there was a little bit of an understanding that Trump may be coming into the power. And even some early numbers, if people were doing that quantitative analysis, started to see that. So I think the other piece that was, I touched on the alternative media. You've got the legacy media, CNN, the MSNBCs, obviously the very left-wing ones. You've obviously got the opposite of that, Fox News, all these news networks. I'm putting Bill Maher into this. I love Bill Maher. Actually, Monica and I watch Bill Maher every week, but he had predicted Kamala. And so there is bubble. And frankly, Monica and I talked about it. Like, if we woke up this morning and our prediction and assessment was wrong, we would have realized that we were in the bubble. But the numbers on this election show that it was the opposite, basically. And the question is, the bubble, is it authentic? Is it propaganda? Is it just narrative, which could be also classified as propaganda for some people? But either way, that worldview that they came into this election with Kamala, most likely in some way shattered here this morning. And We've started to see some Democratic reactions. We started to see some last night. There were some good ones that we saw. We saw Jon Stewart come out and talk a little bit about it. There were some people who were even on some of these more legacy news networks starting to have the realization and share their insights. And before it was even done, realizing what was happening and starting to share their assessment. And then we're starting to see the meltdowns here. And okay, well, first I didn't mean to do this. It just popped up on the screen, but we're starting to see, okay, well, here's an entire thread. So this came, I don't know, but people very upset. Now, okay, there is some humor to this, but I think there's actually sadness here and some adjustments that's needed to understand this more fully. And I hope there can be a realization and acceptance, integration of the lessons that come from this. Because I think if they continue to double down, there would be ostracization. And the concern was that if more people voted that it would be Republicans who would always lose. But it seems if Democrats continue trending this way, that it's actually going to be the opposite. The Republicans will be picking people off the Democratic Party and more people will be gravitating towards them. And part of it, obviously, the economy side of it, and part of it is this return to normalcy, whatever that even means. Part of it is just pushback against radical leftist ideologies that have been pushed across the world right now. And we're here in Canada. I can see Trudeau trending. I can see Pierre Poilievre trending. There's a high expectation that Trudeau next year is out. And if anything, he posted this image about Trump congratulating him. But there's a huge signal here that this is what's going to happen in Canada next year. And Pierre will be our next prime minister in Canada. And I think there is an overall pushback and wave that's actually taking place right now that we need to understand. And most people wish would even take the signal step down today and just start this process that we know is going to happen instead of delaying it a year while most likely the U.S. moves forward and basically accelerates. So basically U.S. accelerates. It looks like there's going to be an unlock on the U.S. economy. So the U.S. grows. And then what that generally means, probably Canada weakens. And then we don't have the leadership, I would say, leadership strength is not there. We've seen this over and over again. You can call Trudeau whatever you want, beta cuck, weak, part of this leftist ideology that is being pushed out in the US here right now, a purge, basically. But it's obvious that Trudeau and the party in power here right now is that. And yes, even this week, we're seeing more regulations on oil companies here in Canada, which I have both sides of this, Bambi, and watched all this and know that there is detrimental effects on the health of the world. But at the same time, you get a little bit older and you start to think, hey, there is an economic engine here that has a lot of capacity. And with that economic engine, you can actually fund innovation and then figure out how to do things greener, do things cleaner that we're not honoring and respecting here as Canadians with some of the best natural resources and one of the biggest countries in the world with fresh water and all of this stuff. And I do not want to see Trudeau go into a negotiation with Donald Trump. I don't think that's a good thing. I think most people would much rather see Pierre do it. First of all, more of a friendly relationship and alignment. And overall, Pierre seems to be more articulate and willing to be combative if required, which could be required. Hopefully, there's more of a friendly alignment there. So what went wrong for Democrats? I'll say, like, I'm 32 now. I hope I get some reaction or feedback on this stuff because I'm just excited. Monica, my wife, went to work today. I got no one to talk to, really, besides work, and I don't really want to bring it into work too much. So part of this is getting this out here. But I guess what went wrong for Democrats? Identity politics would be one. I think the big one that sticks out is just like inflation. That's really hammered people over the last few years. And someone on Bloomberg said the triple I's: interest, inflation, and I can't remember the third I, but the interest rates obviously being that. So I think there's these core issues, the identity politics, and then there's the inflation, there's interest rate, and just like the overall economy. There are signals that the economy, especially in America, is super strong. So there was like pushback against that. But I think also, again, that ideology brings more, like the one big talking point that continued to come up was men playing women sports, and even just, again, like this idea of gender ideology and what is a woman, what is a man, really playing a role here on this pushback. And personally, I consider myself a person in relative ways. I'm a progressive person, but saying that, for you don't know, anyone who doesn't know what pansexual is, I don't need to define it here, but you're attracted to anyone who you think is beautiful, and it doesn't really matter. That's how I view the world. And in so many ways, I could be considered, I should be fitting into this Democratic camp, and yet I felt like really went too far with some of these things. So maybe, I don't know, a lot of people are saying, hey, you're on the wrong side of history, and on Twitter saying, oh, I'm documenting every one of you, and they're going to look back. And of course, there's these really big problems with abortion rights. And I think in Canada, we're very lucky. I think it's actually a horrible thing to not have that choice. Trump obviously sent this to the States, doesn't seem to want a national ban. And I hope that is true. And there was voting on this stuff last night. I haven't gone into details, but we're lucky here to not be impacted for that. So I do really understand and empathize with women and like anyone who is actually impacted by that. And I think it's a complex issue. I think there's a lot of challenges there, but I know this was an issue that they leaned into a lot, and still women in large numbers voted for Trump. And so there's going to have to be some assessment there. What other thing that really stuck out was these celebrity endorsements. And I think it was the way that these celebrity endorsements happened. And I'll just say one thing, like Tony Hinchcliffe probably feeling relieved here today that his Puerto Rico joke didn't make a very big impact on that. Seems like, again, Latin people voted for Trump in large numbers. But there was these manufactured moments for Democratic endorsements. You think of the Beyonce and not performing, getting paid to do that. You got Cardi B, whatever, teleprompter, versus people, again, I'll bring them up, but like Elon Musk, you've got Joe Rogan, you've got these much more natural people, and even the way they're endorsing being through direct lenses or their own channels and audiences in a more authentic way that were much more powerful and credible than the endorsements that Democrats had. And I think there will be some assessment on this, that it doesn't matter. And there was a long list, and people that I love. Beyonce is one of my favorite artists. Barack Obama, you had Obama, you had Usher, and I mean, I'm going lower in people that I care about, but lots of questions around what did that mean? Some people saying, hey, are these the diddlers that are caught up and leveraged? And you basically had Elon Musk versus Mark Cuban. And in terms of accomplishments, and in terms of just the way that they went about this, it's just like a huge contrast there. Mark Cuban, Rachel Maddow, the memes that came from this, and then they told him to basically shut up and that they're the same person and all this. So I think memes also, like basically I'll drop that, like the power of the memes was really clear in this election cycle. And just to touch a little further on Elon, I'm a technology entrepreneur. I've gotten more in love with markets and the efficiency that brings, and the innovation and the optimization. And I think there was a very inspiring component, like to watch what Elon did with SpaceX and then the Tesla launch, like in the same week of time, to see like how much someone can accomplish in a very short period while, again, participating in this very heavily, is a really inspiring thing. And I don't know why we want to block that from happening. And say what you want about him personally, whatever, you don't like him. I think he's obviously very interesting, intriguing. He's also a top 20 Diablo player, all of this. The power and the inspiration that comes from the innovation that's coming in the United States is really meaningful and inspiring. And I think they were trying to keep people out of the US before this. I can't imagine now what this looks like, how many people want to go to the US here now after all of this. So this was a big night. The numbers are still going to keep rolling in, and we're going to see the analysis, the data, all of that stuff. But a very fascinating time. And this was my quick reaction to what I saw over the election cycle last night and then leading into tomorrow. And I know there's still some numbers and everything there, but Trump seems to be the clear victory. Kamala Harris did not yet secede. And I know there's some House things there, but that too big to rig seems to come true. And I hope that my assessment gave you some value, and appreciate you checking this out. If you have any thoughts or any feedback, would love to hear what you think. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I know the world gets changed a little bit today, and some people may like that, some people may not, but I hope we can all learn from this and move forward together and be better.